how important is it to innovate and kind of keep your finger on the pulse in terms of new technology and what's around the corner versus being more reactive and waiting for clients to kind of, if anything, validate like, hey, like we're getting a lot of calls about X, we should really look into that thing. For you, like, how do you approach that? Trying to be in the forefront of it, or trying to see like what things kind of take off?
I would say, I like to say, like, we're playing more offense these days, whereas I think for a long time we were kind of playing defense and reacting to asks. I think, the innovation piece and having a strategy and a budget around and ascribing value to innovation, I think is becoming more and more important for us, because it's really easy to just, when the fire hose turns on of kind of client needs and asks, for that to always trump everything else. And so I think, like you said, the more sort of those relationships and the more financially maybe successful you get, it's really easy to forget some of that stuff that when you were younger and scrappier, you would naturally just innovate in, right? You'd take on those creative, challenging projects because you wanted to build your resume and you wanted to be in that position. And so I do think there's a real danger as companies scale that they can lose that. And so then it becomes really important, how do we institutionalize that? Like, how do you institutionalize innovation and creativity and hunger and, all those things that we had naturally when we were sort of a younger, scrappier company.
Yeah, no, I love that. Like I just mentioned, we're talking about LDR right before the call, and I was chatting with Tim Miller about that actually just recently about, just back in the day, your scope is a lot smaller, but it's so easy to get excited about so much stuff. Whereas the one thing we're pondering is it still exciting, or is it the nostalgia that we're looking back at that was the exciting thing, or was that a magic time and people now don't have the bewilderment we would when we created a rotating cube and which was texture mapped, and we're like, holy crap, look at this thing.
Look what we can do. I think there's something that, when the old farts get together, we kind of talk about some of that stuff too, right? Like, I do think it was a unique time for our specific industry, which especially like the motion design industry, where there were so many sort of new tools and innovative breakthroughs. And I think that can be a pitfall, because I think there's still so much of that happening now. One of the things that I notice with the younger generation coming in is they're so fucking good, because there's real, like, A, there's a curriculum built around this that we didn't have. B, there's so much innovation in terms of social media and access to learning and YouTube channels and how-to videos and all this stuff that you were one of the on the forefront of. And like when you first would come out with some of those videos, like you were, when there weren't a lot of you folks doing that, like that was like, sunshine and water for all of us, right? Because it was like, holy shit, like people are showing us how to make this stuff. And I think a lot of us were just figuring it out. And so I think on the one hand, that's really amazing to see in the young talent, where it's like, there's no way I could have gotten a job at Buck, or I could get a job at Buck right now, right? I look at the young talent that's coming in and their portfolios based off of what my portfolio was like at their age. And it's like
the tools you used back then to create that. Cause you're absolutely right. Like, I'll go on ArtStation and be like, this person's 12, like what the hell? Like right. I could never do this like back in the day, but that's just it. Like the way that I might model a human face back then is plotting down vertices and connecting them poly by poly, versus now it's just like you sculpt the sphere and suddenly it's a head. So the tools have become more intuitive, so the technology threshold's kind of been lowered,
which is amazing. And so I think, to me, that's one of the things that is really cool, is like we're starting to see those tools in people's hands that you used to really be much more of a technician for, that now you can really put them in the hands of artists in many ways. But I do think there's something that is also missing in that's important to kind of circle back at the beginning. There was this mindset of really, when you're pushing at the edge of things, that you really do have to be so curious and you have to fail so much. And I know that's a common adage, but like to really be able to push at things and be okay with failing and documenting it and learning from it. And I do think that was just something that was happening at that time that was really led to a lot of really interesting companies and people and artists and things. And I think, again, now we almost need to, we need to institutionalize some of that. We need to find ways to make sure that we're continuing to push on those envelopes to discover new things, because I think it inspires everyone, but it also helps us kind of drive and push into new frontiers, so.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you're absolutely right. Like it's really important to kind of find new inspiration in everything you're doing and new ways to innovate on that. Because I think that it always comes back to well, what if I did it this way? Or what if I use that tool in a completely different way? And even like New York's really famous for this in a lot of ways, especially with motion graphics, is coming up with new concepts that then get copied 100 times for the next 10 years. But it really comes down to like, hey, well, there's a photo or a really cool idea I had. Like, what if I went and made a piece on that? And it's trying to find ways to be creative and unique in a pretty oversaturated world that, has been around long enough that everyone's done something already.
That's funny. We actually kind of have started calling that the what if meeting, which is funny. Like sort of recognizing that that's a thing that we've always sort of done intuitively, but I have a good friend and colleague who worked with Buck when he was kind of a younger in his career, and then he left and he worked for some of the larger tech companies and some studios and stuff. And he kind of came back and we were chatting, and he said, he was the one that kind of like pointed that out. He was like, that what if meeting where everyone gets together and talks about like what this project could be, or what if we tried this thing or did this thing. Like, he's like, that doesn't happen everywhere else. Like, that's really special. And we're like, oh, cool. And then we just started sort of calling it that, which is interesting.
That's cool. To remove all constraints.